It's Saturday today, it's quite early, and I wish I was in bed at the moment, but I wanted to make sure that I was by myself around here, which is the case at the moment, so that's great. I made a good decision. Bonjour, my name's Alice, welcome back to my channel. So last year I made a video about Emily in Paris. It was all about the fact that class does not really exist in that TV series. The characters live lives that they clearly cannot afford. And so this year I want to talk about another thing that Emily in Paris does not show you. It's called La France moche, and it means ugly France. The concept was invented by journalist Vincent Remy. Actually, no, it was invented by his wife, the newspaper secretary. On the cover of the magazine, La France moche is written over a picture of a shopping area. La France moche is everything but what you see on Emily in Paris, or everything but what you saw during the Olympics opening ceremony. Most of the episodes of Emily in Paris are shot in some of the bougiest areas of Paris, which makes all Parisians very angry because now they must deal with the tourists. The TV series filtered out any imperfection to give you the most unauthentic version of what Paris is. I mean, it's true that Paris is very cute. I've been living there for about a year now, and I'm regularly amazed at how pretty it is. But what I found pretty isn't what you see in Emily in Paris. The areas where the TV series is shot are some of the most unexciting places to be in. I mean, I've said it a few seconds ago. That's where all the old bourgeois Parisians are, and they always complain, they rarely say hi, and are super racist and classist as well, so not cute. That's why I wanted to show you a different way of looking at Paris, of looking at France. I want to show you the places that don't end up on the postcards, like this one, for example. And to be honest, it's not just about France, it's the story of most globalized countries. So here are some landscapes that are described as France moche. The shopping centers, the roads with plenty of ad boards, and something we call banlieue, which are the suburban areas. That includes low-income areas like the towers, but also low to middle classes, so the pavillon. That's what I have around me at the moment. So this is what we mean by France moche, and to be honest, this is not specific to France. You can find similar patterns in most globalized countries. Most cities look fairly similar as soon as you leave their town centers, their historic centers. So as soon as you enter peri-urban spaces, that's the word we give to it. Peri means around, urban means city. So in Latin languages, we use the word peri-urbanization. In English, you would say urban sprawl, but I'm going to keep peri-urbanization because I want to sound smart, I guess. I don't know. Peri-urbanization started in Europe and in the US in the 1950s, 1960s, with the democratization of the car. The car allowed couples and families to leave the chaos of cities and find peace in a more natural environment. Before that, only the elites could afford to travel between the city and their peri-urban home with horses and whatnot. With the industrialization of cities towards the end of the 19th century, urban planners thought it'd be a good idea to reorganize the city and its surroundings to improve the living conditions of people. You see it, for example, with the Garden City movement launched by Howard in his book Tomorrow, A Peaceful Path to Real Reform, published in 1898. Howard wanted to combine the benefits of the city with the benefits of the countryside. Here are some examples around the world. The movement became quite popular as it coincided with demands for more housing after the Second World War. In the UK, for example, the New Towns Act of 1946 triggered the creation of several garden cities to de-densify London. These new towns provide services, employment, green spaces, and safety for their inhabitants, so why wouldn't people choose them? Peri-urbanization came a bit later in France, towards the end of the 1960s. To be honest, in 1928, the French government encouraged the construction of individual houses along railways for working-class families. But it's only after the war, when demands for housing skyrocketed, that the government launched the construction of residential towers on agricultural land close to the city, and also finally caught up with their neighbors by building more individual houses inspired by the garden cities. Starting in the 1960s, they invited American firms Levitt & Sons and Kaufman & Broad to help them in the process. That's why French suburbs look like American suburbs. From then on, the house became a consumer good. It was fully integrated into consumer society. So the American firms brought the American dream to France. The French dream is having a peri-urban home, 2 kids, a pet, an SUV if you don't care about the environment. As soon as 1947, the National Institute for Demographic Studies recorded that 72% of French people wanted to have an individual home. And it's not just about the home. French people love the convenience and organization of peri-urban spaces. They are inspired by the famous French architect Le Corbusier, who in the 20th century thought that cities and their surroundings must be organized in a rational way. The guy was obsessed with zoning, and so he imagined 4 different zones to fulfill 4 different functions: life, work, leisure and transportation. Together, these 4 zones are constitutive of the peri-urban way of life, so the French dream. Anthropologist Éric Chauvier, who was quite critical of the phrase ugly France, explained that going to the discount store like Jiffy gave the impression of having purchasing power, to exist through the act of buying, so to be someone. Scholar Fabrice Raffin adds that peri-urban spaces are often mocked but are nevertheless appreciated by the people who use them. It's an identity marker and it brings back this American dream, Hollywoodian aesthetic, he says. So this is what social scientists see in real life, but even if you look at art, for example, if you look at literature, I'm going to use the example of Annie Ernaux, who's a very popular French author. She won the Nobel Prize a few years ago, and she's known for her style of writing, which is very realistic, almost sociological. But anyway, she wrote this book, Look at the Lights, My Love, which is all about peri-urban life and how it shapes people's lives, really. Let me read some of it to you, actually. I really like this passage, for example. So from November 2012 to October 2013, I made a record of most of my visits to the Auchan superstore in Cergy, where I usually go for reasons of convenience and pleasure, essentially linked to its location inside the Trois Fontaines shopping center, the largest in Val d'Oise. Trois Fontaines is a new kind of town center. Owned by a private group, it is completely closed and monitored. No one can enter outside of set hours. When you walk by it late at night, after getting off the commuter train, its silent mass is more desolate than a cemetery. Existing together on 3 levels are all the shops and payable services that a given population is likely to need. A supercenter, fashion boutiques, hair salons, a medical center and pharmacies, a daycare center, fast food restaurants, cigarette, magazine, newspaper vendors, etc. The customers, for the most part, belong to the middle and working classes. For those not used to it, the place is disorienting, not as a labyrinth is, like the city of Venice, but as a result of a geometric structure in which shops that are easily confused with one another are aligned on either side of a right-angled walkway. This is a vertigo produced by symmetry, reinforced by the fact that the space is enclosed, though open to the daylight through a big glass canopy that replaces the roof. End of the quote. It's beautifully written, isn't it? I feel like there are so many things to say about this passage, but I'm just going to comment on the fact that, Annie Ernaux is describing what she calls the new town center, and through that description we get to see what peri-urban life looks like, what it feels like as well. To be honest, I feel like this description helps us see peri-urban life in a different way. Since the beginning of the video, we've associated it with the word ugly. But when you read the description of Ernaux, I don't think the word ugly is what would come to mind. Actually, she says she goes there for pleasure. She also acknowledges that, sometimes it's not as fun, that there are masses of people, that it's busy, that it's very scheduled. So it's not good, but it's not bad either. And that reminds me of a little podcast episode that I listened to in preparation for this video. Basically, experts were invited to comment on the phrase ugly France. And one of those experts, called Elodie Bitsindu, said something that profoundly resonates with the passage I have just read. She says that aesthetically pleasing, peri-urban spaces say what they are. They make their function very clear. And she implies that there is a certain kind of beauty to it. Elodie Bitsindu is not the only one seeing beauty in ugly France. The French singer Eddie de Pretto also wrote a song called Beaulieu, Beautiful Place, which is a play on word with the term banlieue. In the song, Eddie de Pretto explains that he leaves the banlieue to go to the city, where, quote,
Ici, c'est pas pareil, tout est bien plus beau. Du pareil au même, mais tout est bien plus faux.
everything is much more pretty, but much more fake, like it is the case in Emily in Paris. So once again, we go back to this idea of peri-urban spaces saying what they are, the good and the bad. In the song, Eddie talks about the anger and violence that exist in banlieue, but he also talks about the pride, ambition and creativity that are inherent to them. He concludes,
Ô Beaulieu, bel et bien ma favorite, je garde toutes tes briques.
progressive people also tend to appreciate the aesthetic of ugly France, specifically the suburban towers, because they embody functionality, and functionality is a big part of the working class aesthetic. They romanticize the aesthetic, like it is the case with the Hong Kong public housing units, which have been turned into an Instagram spot. Technically, we're talking about Emily in Paris, so I feel like I need to talk about progressive Parisians and how they romanticize the working class aesthetic. I'll tell you 2 anecdotes. I feel like complaining today. The first one was, I would say, about a year ago. Me and my ex would go to tennis. I've played tennis for a very, very long time, so I wanted to continue practicing in Paris, even though it's very expensive. But anyway, we were waiting for the tram back to Paris after the tennis lesson, and then we met a group of friends, or at least like friends of a friend. We started talking to them, and I noticed that they were dressed in a very almost like homeless aesthetic type of way, you know, very vintage, but a specific type of vintage. And yeah, they told us that they were coming back from the PMU. Which, if you're French, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but PMU is basically a sort of bar type of place where you can also buy cigarettes, where you can bet on horses. They are primarily known for this. You can do lotteries, or like a bunch of different things. But those spaces are very much known for being working class people's spaces. So the fact that they went there to hang and drink cheap beers and bet on horses, they told us, with their homeless person aesthetic, felt very weird to me and to my ex. Working class for him, I would say low middle class for me. And we were dressed with our little tennis outfit, with our little racket and stuff. We looked all bourgeois. And then on the other hand, you had those kids, privileged kids, who were dressed as homeless people, going to the PMU and etc. So yeah, it feels very therapeutic actually to tell that story, because I love Paris, but those progressive emulating working class aesthetic is just something that really, really triggers me. But anyway, second anecdote, let's go. The second anecdote is kind of similar. I was in Paris once again, in a kind of hip, cool area. I was going to a bar with a friend, and there was another guy standing at the bar, and we started talking, and he asked me where I was coming from, and I said Lille. And he said, oh, Lille, well, I'm actually against you. I'm like your enemy because I support Lens, the football team Lens. So Lens is not a big football team. It's a significant football team in the north of France, but it's not that big of a deal. But somehow a lot of Parisians love Lens. So the guy went on and explained the history of Lens, which is in the north of France. It's a former, around all the former mining sites. And so during the weekend, miners would go religiously to the football matches. And yeah, my mom grew up close to Lens in the former mining sites, so I kind of knew all of that story. It wasn't new to me. And to be honest, I was convinced that this guy was coming from Lens as well, because of how much he knew about the place and the history of the team, etc. So I asked him, oh, what do you think about Parisians cosplaying working class aesthetic, specifically with Lens? Because I had seen a lot of Parisians wearing the Lens scarf and things like that. So I was like, well, what do you think about that? And all of a sudden he looked a bit like taken aback, and he was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, true, yeah, I don't know. At some point he left, I believe, and I looked at my friend and we kind of talked about that conversation, and I realized that the guy was actually not from Lens. He was yet another Parisian who wanted to, embrace that working class aesthetic, and I got tricked. To be honest, I was embarrassed for like 2 seconds, and then I was laughing because I was like, fucking hell, they're everywhere. They are everywhere. I told this story to my mom, and she found it funny, and she said that when she was young, she also had to deal with the similar type, the hippie type with long hair and like half open shirts, and listening to popular music or whatever. I don't know. I feel like Lens is not as popular in Paris anymore. People are slowly moving on to Johnny Hallyday, who's a very popular French singer, but like mostly loved by working class people. So yeah, these were my little stories, and I know I need to work on my negative emotions. But honestly, like, come on. Jokes aside, I think the moral of the story is that it is possible to find a middle ground between the very negative, ugly France and the toxically positive romanticization of peri-urban spaces. As we've seen in this video, people already do it. Annie Ernaux did it in her book. Edith de Pretto did it in his song. In their art, they ground peri-urban spaces through life experiences. So that means that they add time and movement to the spaces. So in other words, they contextualize them, they historicize them. We don't have to call peri-urban France or peri-urban spaces in general pretty or ugly. We can just appreciate how they are part of our history.
The shopping centers, suburbia, the burst of the automobile, are a legacy of what French people call les 30 glorieuses, the glorious 30, meaning the 30 years of economic growth and globalization that followed the Second World War. The towers around Paris are a symbol of post-war immigration which allowed to rebuild our country and economy. They are now a place of hardship, but also a place of hope, bursting with creativity, influencing Paris and influencing the world. You know what I'm referring to here if you watch my last video? A TV series like Emily in Paris doesn't show this side of France because it wants to prioritize what makes France exceptional, unique, not what makes it universal. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was not really on Emily in Paris, maybe I tricked you. I wanted to talk about peri-urbanization for a long time and I thought that that was the right opportunity. But yeah, feel free to tell me what you thought about the video in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not already done. I would like to thank my patrons for their support and a special thanks to top tier patrons. Gazi Chic, Neil Verma, Galinax de Haute-Moselle, Yop Nguyen, Patrick Button, Devish Mohan Mina, Jeff Lee, Dominic Dalek, Yilan Huang, Tayab Matin, Nick, Tinful Pancakes, Marshall, Brandon, James, Ojwal, Pablo, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Ivan, Donage, Alex, Toki, Koriji, Tristan, Patricia, Christopher, Manuel, Christopher France, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. Finally, I need to talk to you about my sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to grow your presence online. They give you a bunch of tools to create your ideal websites. So this is mine so far, Alice Capelle. I use it as a platform to kind of show all the work that I do on YouTube, my contributions, but also my book. I also added all my social media accounts. You also have analytical tools. You can run effective email campaigns. On their website, you can also get advice from professionals on how to build your website, etc. So many things you can do. So if you're interested in it, if you want to try it out, then go to squarespace.com to get a free trial. And once you're ready to go public, then you can go to squarespace.com/AliceCapelle to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring the video. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you very soon. Salut!